Hello everyone and welcome to The Good Old Gamer. So in the last video in this series, we took a look at the Ryzen 7 3700X and I compared it next to its stock performance with the baseline memory that you guys in the community said is DDR4 3200 compared to a tweaked, overclocked, and tuned system. We saw a whopping 20% performance improvement on that chip. Now I wanted to start with that CPU because we're going to use the Ryzen 7 as a baseline. So in today's video, we're going to be comparing that system directly to Intel's $99 powerhouse, the Core i3 12100. So I wanted to set up the stage and show you guys how good Zen 2 can be if you properly tune it, because to be honest, it's going to need every advantage it can get against this little monster. And I want to show you guys just how powerful this guy is. But before we get into it, today's video is sponsored by you guys. This is entirely possible because of all of my fantastic supporters, all of you guys that have joined the Good Old Gamer family. I chat with you guys constantly over on Discord. I love getting into the conversations. Just the other night when Zen 4 was announced, the first thing I did was jump in there and talk with you guys. So if you want to become a member, you can go ahead and do so by clicking the little join button down below here on YouTube or clicking on the Patreon link down in the description down below. And that gives me the resources necessary to do deep dive videos like this and show you guys what is out there and actually show you the difference between just a baseline stock system and a fully tuned system. So this way you can make the best and most informed purchasing decisions for your next PC upgrades. So kicking things off with the test bench. So this way you guys know all of the parts that I used and some of the trials and tribulations that came with that. First off, I was using the Intel Core i3 12100. I'm using the non-F version, but the F version at retail is the best value. I got one for $110 with the iGPU. If you can do that, it's worth picking up. Otherwise, just go with the F. You're going to be using discrete graphics for gaming anyway. Now, originally I paired it with the Gigabyte B660M DS3H DDR4. This board, avoid like the plague. I'm just gonna put a big red X over this thing. Do not buy this motherboard. That's why I'm bringing this up. It worked just fine at first. I got through an entire round of benchmarks. It was running great. Had my overclocks tuned in, all that stuff. And then all I did was shut it down and turn it back on a day or two later, and it just would not work. So that left me in a bit of a pickle because I wanted this to be the second video in the series. However, instead of buying this, what I should have done was spend the extra $10 and got the MSI Pro B660M-A. This motherboard right here is basically the B660 version of the motherboard that I ended up using. This is very reasonably priced, only $129, and this is gonna do basically exactly what you're gonna see in this video. Now, what I ended up using, because like I said, I was in a bit of a pinch, I went down to my local Best Buy. They did have the MSI Pro Z690-A DDR4 on hand. So I did a little borrowing with Best Buy just to get this video made for you guys. However, this is clearly overkill for this type of system. But if you want a good motherboard now, cheap CPU, and upgrade later, I'd recommend going this route. As under $200, this thing gave me no issues, perfectly smooth and flawless. And while I don't have the hands-on experience with this board, it's the exact same thing, just with the B660 chipset. So I would just go this route personally. Now, just like in the last video, we're going to be comparing stock with DDR4 3200 CL16 memory. You guys voted, you said 3200 megahertz DDR4 is what you consider standard across the board. So for stock testing, this is the kit that we're going to be using. This is a dual rank kit. So for you overclockers out there, you guys will understand that this is actually going to be better than if I used a single rank kit, which is what I used for the overclocked numbers. I used the Patriot Viper SteelSeries DDR4 16 gigabyte 2x8 4000 megahertz CL19 memory. So this kit right here, this is single rank. So I'm actually giving stock a little bit of an advantage by using a dual rank kit. I simply don't have any 2x8s with CL16 3200. So that's the reason why we're doing it this way. So technically, I'm giving that a little bit of a leg up. And I'm actually hampering the overclock just a little bit, but overall, this is one of the best memory kits you can buy right now. However, for just a few dollars more, I just noticed on Amazon they have the SteelSeries 4000 CL16 kit at $99. So for just a few dollars more, you might want to go this route. However, the other kit that I have, which is CL19, those are a little bit cheaper on eBay. So you can go ahead and pick those ones up on eBay. These should be $88. This one's $100. What's the real difference? Well, they're both Samsung B die, and they should technically be the same. This one's just guaranteed to hit 16, 16, 16, 36 at at 4000 megahertz at 1.45 volts. The other one's 1.35 volts at CL19. Regardless, I can do these with my kit, which is the cheaper kit. So Samsung B-Die is Samsung B-Die, but typically, if you want to make sure that you're going to get the greatest numbers for 10 bucks more, you might as well go this route. And then for storage, Kingston was nice enough to send over their Kingston Fury Renegade 2TB PCIe Gen 4 NVMe. And this bad boy is up to 7,300 megabytes per second. This thing is fast. Right now they're on sale. This is way cheaper than they've been. They've typically been around this $400 mark. So this is actually a good price if you want a super high speed NVMe at a decent price with good capacity. Now, obviously the 4TB at $800, you do you at that price point. But 283 for this speed is actually very, very good. So I'd recommend picking one of these up. It works with the PlayStation 5. It hits the specs there as well. And it has its own built-in heatsink, so you don't even have to worry about that. It's a great SSD, love it, and I could easily recommend this bad boy. And then for the GPU, we're using the same one, the RTX 3060 EVGA XC Gaming. I would not recommend picking one up at this price point. Once they hit maybe $400, $380, these might make some sense. I got mine at a decent deal, but it just happens to be the fastest graphics card that I have available right now. And since the i3-12100 is a locked processor, you don't need a Z-series motherboard. However, I do want to go over the specs that I got on this. So basically, all we're doing is memory overclocking. That's why I'm going to talk a lot about memory, making sure you got some Samsung B-Die, stick with DDR4, and you can't really go wrong in today's market. But I unfortunately did not win the Silicon Lottery on this one, unlike the 3700X, which I have a golden sample of. So basically, this is worst case scenario i3 versus best case scenario 3700X. So take that for what it is. But this one right here, the internal memory controller is only getting me DDR4 at 3600. Now I had that tuned to 14, 14, 14, 28, 1T, and the latency on that using IDA64 and those guys, 47.7 nanoseconds. For me, anything under 50 on Intel is fine. Granted, there's gonna be people going, you can get much lower. Yeah, if you can get higher frequencies and a bunch of other things, sure. But in my opinion, under 50 nanoseconds, perfectly fine. You're gonna get most of the performance. There's just no point in tuning any further, in my opinion. But regardless, there is no other overclock on here. Other than that, it is just stock. So I do want to make sure that you guys are aware of that. There's no magic here. I'm not doing any B clock overclocking or any of that stuff. Not available on the board that I had. And realistically, if it's not available on all boards, I'm not gonna bring it up to you guys anyway, because it doesn't matter. It's not a feature most people are gonna be able to use. So yeah, all it is, a little bit of memory overclock. But trust me, it makes a big difference than using 3200 C16. So we're kicking things off with Cyberpunk 2077. Settings are 1080p high DLSS ultra performance. Same settings that we used in the last video. So the stock 3700X is coming in at 100 FPS on average. It's in comparison to 121 on the 12100. And then we have 65 on the 1% low. That goes up to 75 on the 12100. So the monster overclock 3700X, basically God bin that we have here at 4.5 gigahertz, 3733 C14. I just need to reiterate how good of an overclock this is, because these numbers are nuts. So that comes in at an average of 115 FPS on average. And the tuned, this isn't even overclocked, it's technically the exact same stock clocks, running at 3600 C14, comes in at 131 FPS on average. Then the 3700X at 74 on the 1% low, goes all the way up to 88 on the i3-12100. So next up is Far Cry 5 720p medium. We have the stock 3700X at 130 FPS average and 100 on the 1% low. That goes up to 155 and 115 on the stock 12100. The overclock 3700X at 151 average and 117 on the 1% low goes all the way up to 183 on the average and 137 on the 1% low. Next up is Horizon Zero Dawn 720p medium, as there's no DLSS in this game. The stock 3700X comes in at 155 FPS average and 98 on the 1% low. That's in comparison to 172 FPS on average and 114 on the 1% low. The 3700X overclock comes in at 170 FPS average and 119 on the 1% low, in comparison to 187 on the 12100 overclock and 125 on the 1% low. So I think you guys are starting to see the trend on this one already, but once again, like I said in the last video, we're going to continue with the benchmarks. Next up is Starcraft 2, a very single-threaded game that Paul absolutely loves. This one right here, we don't have to worry about GPU getting in the way, so we just run 1080p high. So the stock 3700X gets 215 on average, 141 on the 1% low. It's in comparison to 282 on average and 194 on the 1% low for the i3-12100. The overclocked 3700X gets 244 on average and 168 on the 1% low. Goes all the way up to 299 FPS on average and 211 on the 1% low. Next up, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, 1080p, high settings, DLSS, ultra performance. The stock 3700X at 128 and 73. That goes up to 141 and 94 on the stock 12100. And then the overclocked 3700X has a 148 average and a 97 1% low. That goes up to 151 FPS on average and then 106 on the 1% low. So in this title, we're actually getting much more comparable performance between the overclocked 3700X and the tuned or overclocked, however you want to call it, 12100 over here. And yeah, I mean, it's good to see that under very heavily multi-threaded applications, the 3700X can claw back some performance, but in this case, it's still losing to the i3-12100. But that is not the case in Watchdogs Legion. So we have the first win for the Ryzen CPUs. We have the stock version coming in at 88 on the average FPS and 69 on the 1% low. That's in comparison to 92 and 72 on the stock 12100. So you might be able to just say that that's margin of error. That's close enough there. And then the overclocked 3700X at 103 on average and 81 on the 1% low. That's in comparison to 99 FPS on average and 78 on the 1% low. Once again, you could say that's probably margin of error. So if you're going to say it is here to give AMD the advantage, you'd probably have to say here. But in this particular case, the overclocked 3700X does have a bit of an advantage. And then the last game that we tested is Witcher 3 720p medium. In this one, we have the Ryzen 7 3700X at 151 average, 115 on the 1% low. It's in comparison to 171 on average and 136 on the stock 12100. Next, we have the overclocked 3700X at 173 on average and then 137 on the 1% low. It's real easy to remember, 137, 173. I just noticed that now. It's kind of funny. Anyways, that's in comparison to the tuned 12100 at 193 FPS on average and 147 on that 1% low. So all right, so averaging out the 7 games and focusing on the 1% low data, which in my opinion is the most relevant as this will tell you how the games feel to play. We have the 3700X stock coming in at, on average, of 94 FPS for the 1% low, and then you have the overclocked coming in at 113 on average for the 1% low. The stock i3-12100 with 3200 CL16 comes in on average on the 1% lows of 114 FPS on average, beating out the overclocked Ryzen 7 3700X. And then the overclocked version coming in at 127, making this the first CPU in this series to have an average 1% low over 120 FPS, meaning high refresh gaming will be 100% flawless on an overclocked i3-12100. Now for some comparison numbers, just tuning the memory up from 3200 C16 to 3600 C14 and subtimings and so on. I know it's not just the CAS latency, somebody's gonna mention that. But if you tune your memory properly, and like I said, you should be able to get higher than this, probably 3800 C14 should be a thing. Anyways, that nets you 11.4% just overclocking your memory on the i3-12100 using Samsung B-Die memory. In comparison to the stock 3700X, the stock 12100 actually comes in at 21.3% higher. This is why it's actually beating out even our overclocked Ryzen 7 3700X because that was 20% higher. So yeah, that is staggering when you think about it. This is still selling for about $200, the 3700X, and you can get one of these guys for 99 bucks. In gaming, even the stock 12100 is superior. Well, alrighty guys, I know a lot of you out there have been saying, hey Chris, when are you going to admit that quad cores are dead? Well, they're not. They're actually extremely good. And we're focusing on the 1% low numbers here, fellas. This is not like averages or some pie in the sky numbers that don't really matter. It's the 1% low, and the 12100 is winning. This is going to be a shocker for a lot of people out there. They don't expect a $100 chip to be beating, a $300 chip from just a couple of years ago. Well, that's the case in this particular instance. You have the evidence. I presented it for you. In the future, if we get enough support and this series does well, I would like to do expanded testing, add more to the roster, maybe like a 15 game average. And I'd also like to get my hands on a proper high-end GPU, but I'm going to wait until next generation GPUs come out because it doesn't make sense buying anything right now. But I do want to revisit these in the future. But as of right now, the i3-12100 is without a doubt a monstrous CPU at $99. I can just tell you right now, if you're looking for a new CPU with the current generations between either AMD or Intel, this one is unbeatable. Nothing is going to be able to touch this in terms of price to performance. This thing is a absolute beast, as you guys saw. 120 FPS plus on your 1% lows on average. So if you're running 120 hertz or 144 hertz display and you play mostly single player games like I do, it's really the only CPU you need for gaming. Now, if you need to do more things than gaming, obviously you might need some more cores and some other stuff. But this guy is definitely great if you need just a little game box for a friend, yourself, secondary, living room, whatever. There's nothing more that I could say that the benchmarks haven't already said. But I do want to touch on the fact that just going up in memory, just tuning your memory net about 11.5%. And that is something a lot of people don't realize. There's a ton of extra performance there in your CPU if you just take the time to properly tune the thing. So if you don't have a good kit, Samsung B-Die, go out and get some. If you're running a DDR4 platform, because you may not even need a CPU upgrade. This may get you that extra performance that you're looking for already, which is really, really excellent. But in this case, this wasn't even that great of an overclock. Like I said, I really expect most of these should probably hit 3800 C14, and that probably nets you another 4 to 5% over what we're seeing here, which is really crazy when you think about it. Imagine if I showed you guys like a 17 or 18% lead over stock, and that's basically a 17-18% lead over a max overclock 3700X, as the stock 12100 is about on par with the maxed overclock 3700X. So yeah, I'm super excited to see how the rest of this series goes. I want to test out a lot of other CPUs. The more support I get from you guys, the more of these that I can do. Like I said, on the docket, we have the 5960X. That's going to be revisited. We're going to retest that one, see how it comes up against the overclocked 3700X, and kind of like a grudge match there. I also picked up an i7 2600K for just some old school stuff, see if that's still hanging in there. If it's good enough, maybe, who knows? I got the i7 3960X, the big Sandy Bridge, which will obviously compare to tiny Sandy Bridge, and see how that all goes. As right now, I believe that's probably the best deal out there if you're looking for the cheapest, best CPU, as they're only about $40 for a 6-core, 12-thread. And yeah, the performance that I'm seeing is looking pretty good. Can't wait to share that with you. I also have my buddy's Ryzen 7 5800X, which we will add into this list right here. And that's everything that I have on hands right now. I'm working on getting some other CPUs. We're going to be doing a lot more testing. I'm having a blast with this. It's really nice to see how things perform. You're getting basically your hardware unboxed number. That's your stock number. And then you're getting the, if you want to spend a few minutes and buy the right stuff to pair with it, how much you can really get out of these things. So we're seeing the real performance comparison between CPUs, and I'm really excited to show this on as many as possible, but I can't really do that without your help. If you want to help support the channel, there's a thanks button down below. You could use that. Become a member over on YouTube or Patreon, either one that helps out. And we do have an overclocking section on Discord, which I can help you out if you want to start getting into this. You want some assistance, that's the best way to do it. And if you don't like any of those, there's PayPal links down below. And honestly, you guys are great. You guys are funding this. You guys are making this all happen. And I'm having a blast with it. I hope you guys are enjoying this. Can't wait for the next one. I'm going to try to bang these out as fast as possible because I want to get this data to you as quickly as possible because I find this fun and interesting. But I want to know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Do you like these type of videos? If not, let me know. We can stop this if you don't like it. But if you do, let me know. I want to know what you guys like, if you want to see anything in particular. And if you want to support, go ahead and tell me and be like, hey man, I want you to try X, Y, or Z. Absolutely. Love to hear your thoughts on all that. As you guys can tell, I'm pretty amped up. I'm ready to go, ready to do some more testing. Later on today, Paul and I are going to be talking about Zen 4 and probably the results of this benchmark. Alder Lake is going to come up a lot. So if you want to join Techonomics Podcast, links are down below. You can join us live. We can have a chat there as well. Alrighty, guys, that's all I have for you here today. I'm excited to catch you guys in the next video.